Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to have all of you here join us. So my name is Lana Abu Qalbain, and I represent the Emirates Green Building Council. We are one of the most advanced councils for green buildings in the MENA region to share awareness and promote green building practices. Together, we're going to be discussing a very interesting webinar, and I'll leave it to Sana to introduce herself and the knowledge sharing webinar happening soon and our panelists as well. So I hope you have a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lana. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really great that all our panelists could be here with us today. And thank you to the audience as well for joining. So my name is Sana Hafsa. I'm a sustainability coordinator at AESG. So what we do is provide sustainability consulting for cities, for master plans and buildings as well. So a large part of the sustainability consulting is for wellness and well-being within our spaces. So we all have a lot of awareness, or at least a few things about sustainability, but it kind of gets broken down to, at its base, it's meeting the needs of today and ensuring that we don't compromise the needs of the future. And the reason that well-being plays such a large role within this is because there's this mutual codependency between the long-term health of the planet as well as our own physical and mental health. And the two of these have this really close relationship between each other, and a lot of things that we do in terms of the ecosystem affect us and vice versa. Well-being is a very large topic. It's beyond just looking at the absence of illness, but it's related to actually enhancing our health, enhancing satisfaction in our lives through encouraging activity and movement, through encouraging productivity, our connection as a community. And all of this is through many different aspects, again, of air quality, water quality, acoustics, light, so many different factors. Now, in terms of course, built spaces and the spaces that we live in, our responsibility is to try and design these spaces to account for all these parameters as much as possible so that we can really address this large topic of well-being. So over here, we have a great group of panelists where they will be providing a bit more detail on how these two topics are connected to each other. What are the impacts? Why should we really be considering this? And that being said, I will just hand it over to each of our panelists. Dr. Jeffrey is not yet here, but hopefully he will be joining us soon. Avan, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sana. My name is Avan Al-Pasha. I work in AD Ports Group. I'm an environmental officer, so I oversee the environmental permitting, compliance, and management of our projects, from the scoping and design phase all the way through construction and execution. That involves, of course, a lot of, looking at ways that we can mitigate impacts during the development phases of our projects, and ensuring that we do things, of course, in a sustainable way. Happy to be here and joining all of you.
Mohammed, maybe you can go next.
Yes. First, I would like to thank the EGBC for this opportunity. I'm Muhammad Shbara from Dar al-Handasa, from the electrical department. Dar al-Handasa is a multidisciplinary engineering firm. We do design for construction projects, from master plans, infrastructure, to buildings. We develop design for all types of projects, high-rise, aviation, hospitality, etc. We focus on how to deliver the optimal sustainable solution within all our projects, where I would like to share this experience during this panel today.
Thanks, Mohammed. Angie?
Thanks, Sana. I'm Angie Sanchez. I'm the air quality specialist at the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. At the ministry, we oversee the implementation of the National Air Quality Agenda that outlines all the initiatives and activity to improve the level of air quality of our country with the ultimate purpose of enhancing the quality of life of the residents of the country.
All right, that's great. So yeah, just again to our audience, thank you for being here. We're going to try and keep a bit of time for questions at the end. Let's see how the session goes. So yeah, we can just maybe kickstart by, the main question of the day is we've got a lot of different backgrounds over here, and as we mentioned before, well-being is quite a large topic. So maybe we can just have a round of what well-being means to each of you, coming from your background. Muhammad, we can start with you.
Yes. Actually, for me, well-being is referred to as a person's overall quality of life and their sense of contentment, happiness, and fulfillment. Well-being can be observed from different or several dimensions. Namely, it can be physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, environmental, financial, and economical, as well as cultural, and it can be defined as the sense of purpose and satisfaction in life for each and every human being.
Yeah, that's great. Really comprehensive one. Avan?
Yeah, so well-being to me is it's a reflection of our physical, mental, and emotional health. I think how content or comfortable we are with our lives. I think feeling both physically and mentally healthy, having important social connections in our lives, having a sense of purpose. I think all of that can contribute positively to our sense of well-being.
Dr. Jeffrey. Sorry, just very quickly, Dr. Jeffrey, thank you for joining us. We just quickly introduced the session and we had a round of introductions. If you want, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, and we are currently discussing what well-being means to you. So you
Great.
can go with that.
Great. Hi, Jeff Chapman here, Chair of Quality and Patient Safety at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, and also Chair of the Respiratory Institute, which constitutes pulmonary and allergy.
Nice. Angie, maybe we can come back to your definition, how you see well-being from your point of view.
Well, I think many of the previous speakers touch on quality of life, and for many of us, that phrase in the UAE makes a lot of sense to define well-being, especially in a community where there's a lot of expats. When we are thinking of what country to choose or what city to choose, you are internally measuring again like your aspects, and it can be, as you spoke, like financial, um, physical, mental, social. So each one of us has like an internal meter tracking um, how how satisfied we are with that. So I think once we find all those ones that make us satisfied, then we start defining I am comfortable, I have quality of life, this is well. And it all ultimates reflects in health, mental health and physical health.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if anything from these definitions from everyone, it's clear that, in 1 hour, we definitely can't touch on all of these, but we will do our best. Dr. Jeffrey, do you have anything you want to add to that of what well-being kind of means from your point of view as a doctor?
Yeah, for me, it means living up to your full potential and your full capabilities, both emotionally, mentally, physically, and as a physician, we kind of deal with the base level. If you can't breathe and you can't have health, then you can't have a good quality of life in many ways, or makes it more difficult. So we start from that, but it really encompasses everything from your physical well-being to your emotional and your connectivity to the community in that way. So really, physical health is kind of almost a base layer where it facilitates all of the other health also.
Yeah. So considering that, what you mentioned of just that base layer, we can jump right into discussing what exactly is the impact of air quality on health, and how is the relationship between the two of them for you, Dr. Jeffrey?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things we know about this, and assumptions that we've made in the past were completely wrong. The simplest level is in terms of air quality that that we can think of is your own personal air quality, which is smoking. Still somewhere around 15% of the population still smokes or vapes or uses tobacco in some form. And that's the best thing you can do to improve your health, both short term and long term. There are over 4,000 chemicals in tobacco when it's burned, and each of those chemicals can do bad things and leading to long-term health risks, which we know about, such as lung cancer, emphysema, which is destroying of the lung, chronic bronchitis, but also once those chemicals, the small ones, get into the blood vessels, then they increase your risk of vascular diseases such as heart attack and stroke. And when we extrapolate that to the outdoor environment, we know that air pollution also will lead to bad things happening. Probably the most well studied and worst known is diesel emission particles, where those carbonaceous particles, they're small, they get into the lungs. Yeah, they worsen asthma. They can actually even in some instances cause asthma, but they do worsen other respiratory conditions, but they're small enough to get into the vasculature to cause things such as heart attacks and strokes, big strokes, little strokes that lead to dementia. So making sure that community air quality is good is a key factor that we all have to address. It's amazing when you think of 10, 15 years ago, we were pushing, because they're more fuel efficient in a way. Diesel engines were all the rage all over Europe, and we kind of poo-pooed, okay, the emissions aren't that bad. We've got to go for the fuel economy. But the fact that reducing those diesel emissions is such a major part of, we think of the most vulnerable first. So we think of asthma and developing lung disease and the youngest, and then also causing strokes and heart attacks in the oldest. It really affects the most vulnerable. So when I think of air pollution as affecting the lungs, I think of it personally, your own space, and then larger in the community space. And then you have the whole environmental change issue kind of messing that up too. So that's just kind of a way to think about it. But still, with 20 years ago, 25% of the world's adults smoke tobacco. That's amazing, 25%. Now it's down to somewhere between 10 and 15%. So we've made huge strides, but we still can do better. There have been a lot of studies about, in California, it's illegal to smoke in the car with someone under 18 present, because we know that secondhand tobacco will lead to worse asthma and time away from school and lost productivity time for that child. So it's actually illegal to smoke. We've learned a lot of good things also. Ireland was the first country to ban smoking in public places. So they banned it in bars and restaurants and stuff. And everyone thought, it doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it. Well, they found that the health of the people who worked in the bars and the restaurants markedly increased. The days away from work were much less when the smoking ban went into effect. So it does make an impact, all of these, the air that we breathe and its quality. Sorry to go on for so long.
No, it's really wonderful to get that insight. And in fact, something you talked a lot about is even those hazards from smoking. Some spaces here that try and go for having a more healthy and a space considering well-being, they implement having signs of the hazards of smoking in certain spaces designated for smoking. So at least, you're able to kind of make yourself aware of those impacts and then maybe reconsider how many packs you're going to be smoking a day. So it's really great to actually get that insight on not just the personal smoking, but also larger than that, how it's affecting the community. So just to kind of go further into that, we see a lot about how people in general, and especially in this region, we do spend most of our time indoors. And that's why, for example, we have very large considerations for build spaces and buildings. Now, how important is it that we address things like air quality in those spaces, but then should we also be considering it more largely in terms of citywide, in terms of public spaces and open spaces? What is the kind of balance that we would want to strike between those two areas?
Yeah, there's the World Health Organization sets limits on particles. PM 2.5 should be less than 10 per, I forget the denominator unit, but when you look at the science of it, there's no level that's safe. Everything is with a little bit of risk, and it goes to the ALARA, as low as reasonably allowable. So you want to get as clean as possible. And for indoor buildings, I'll let others who are experts on that speak of it here. But yeah, you just want to try to get it as clean as possible. There's nothing really safe, even at a safe level. And I'll open that up to the rest of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw Angie actually nodding over there. I mean, maybe we can go into, if you want to share a bit about, at least for the open spaces in terms of UAE and citywide, what are we doing? What are we trying to address? And how important is it that we address things like what Dr. Jeffrey is talking about?
Yes. So the doctor was mentioning the WHO has these standards of what they have determined, like from where they start seeing effects. But what he says absolutely true. There is no safe level of pollution. From the federal government, how this is treated is we set ambient standards for the country, and these standards are published for specific pollutants. So in the UAE, we have certain criteria pollutants in alignment with the WHO recommendations, and we set what the country has determined as the acceptable level of pollution, not without saying that this is safe, but is acceptable for the conditions of the country. These standards are issued through the Cabinet Decree. At this moment is running Cabinet Decree 12 from the year 2006. And then we try to monitor to ensure that how are we against those standards. So that's how it is managed at the federal level. But then in the UAE, because we have the federal constitution, every single emirate then has an authority that can come up with more stringent standards or mechanisms to controlling the sources of pollution. In the national laws, we also try to tackle certain sources of pollution. So for instance, the doctor was mentioning about diesel. So we do have certain standards for pollution for motor vehicles, for instance, for fuel combustions facilities. So we try to control also from the sources of pollution. And then more specific at the cities, then is framed under the federal regulations, but every single emirate and every single city then starts doing more strong controls through like licensing, permits, and monitoring to do this balance between what people are breathing and what is the load of pollution that is being thrown into the atmosphere, if I can use that word.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that there is a federal kind of breakdown and a standard of what are all the thresholds that need to be met. Is there kind of further guidance on how that gets broken down for it to actually be implemented? So something like you mentioned the standards for motor vehicles. So is there other guidance like that that can allow, companies or certain industries or certain manufacturers to implement that?
So this is for controlling the sources, right? Yeah.
Correct,
So
yes.
at the moment, how it works, for instance, for motor vehicles, yes, it makes direct reference to the national standards for vehicles. So this is managed through them. They all called ESMA. Now it's under the Ministry of Infrastructure. They issue all these standards what a vehicle, like when you buy a car, it says GCC specs. As part of that, there are certain minimum conditions for like exhaust emissions that are allowed, things like that. Or when you're going to do your checking of your vehicle for emissions. So yes, there are further guidelines under other standards for that. In terms of stationary sources that we call, like like a factory that is burning certain fuel to produce energy. So the law has a maximum allowed of emissions from that chimney, from that stack, but every emirate can also have even more stringent to that. And they try to be, at the moment, they are mostly per, we have it under fuel combustion. There is also for waste combustion. And yeah, I think these are the major ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting to know. And I think then when we kind of go from controlling those sources down to, finally in the spaces that we're in at the receiving end, can you share a bit more of whether there are regulations in terms of the scale building wise? How are we controlling entry, maybe through facades and through ventilation systems of buildings, and how strictly is that monitored and regulated?
Yeah, so this is actually a new topic that we are starting to raise from the national agenda. We include indoor air quality for the first time as part of like the air quality portfolio of the country. And it's very new in the country. So like the short answer is there is not yet like a standard for indoor air quality in like what is the acceptable level of certain pollutant in an indoor space. It's work in progress, but what does exist at the moment are building codes. So the federal government has these sustainable guidelines that include certain aspects of indoor air quality, and also certain emirates like Abu Dhabi has the Estidama, there is the Burjil, there is the, I think, the Green Building Code that incorporate some of these elements in terms of concentrations of pollutants, but more important in the aspects of the construction. So things like how should the ventilation systems run to ensure that there is adequate changes of exchange of air, adequate filtering happening. Things in indoor air quality, we have a lot of cases with the materials. So VOCs from the construction materials, lead from the paints, cleaning
The
substances.
products.
Yes. So all these at the moment, it's being touched from the also through the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology. They have the standardization unit and they issue the standards of what is allowed, like what is the paints that are allowed, what is the type of materials that are allowed for these. And currently the focus for until 2031, part of the agenda, is working together with the Ministry of Industry to update those standards if are needed or incorporate new ones to ensure that at least while we can come up with an indoor air quality standard, at least the materials, the construction, the construction requirements, the ventilation systems, at least that is being regulated.
Yeah, no, it's really good to know that that's something that's going to be looked into, because something like you mentioned, Istidama, it's mandatory in Abu Dhabi. There are some codes that are mandatory here in Dubai as well, but the idea of kind of going beyond that to actually establish better minimums is a really important one. So it's good that that's something we're going to be looking into. So Avan, I might just go over to you now. So we kind of know a lot, or we hear a lot about how, nature really improves our well-being. It has this feel-good effect on us. And we also know there is this link between the incorporation of nature and improvement of air quality. Can you expand a bit more on what that link is and whether there are more benefits beyond just that of restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, and how that can have an impact on human health?
Yeah, so we know that preserving our ecosystems and biodiversity is important when it comes to mitigating the impacts of climate change, right? So, but biodiversity is also very, very important to the health and sustainability of all species, including ours. So as humans, we depend on biodiversity. We depend on biodiversity for our survival, whether it's for, for food security or for clean air and water. Biodiversity is crucial for our food supply. So different plant and animal species that provide a variety of different foods for us. And preserving biodiversity in agriculture, it helps us have a stable and diverse diet. It reduces the risk of malnutrition, and overall just promotes better health. So healthy ecosystems, like let's say forests and wetlands, they act as natural filters. So they purify the air we breathe and the water we drink. And when we protect these ecosystems, we're ensuring access to clean water and fresh air, which is of course essential to our health.
Can I just check quickly if we're able to hear Avan? No? All right. Sorry, Avan, are you with us? We're losing you a little bit over there. Sorry about this, everyone. Let's just...
Sorry, hi. I'll just jump in to help, I guess, if I can. So, Avan, can you, the camera is good, but the voice is a bit... Can you try joining again? Just turn it off and join again, please. Thank you. Sana, maybe you can carry on with Muhammad until Avan joins again.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lana. Yeah, so we can kind of, again, pulling back to that overall community-wide improvement of air quality, where we're looking a lot within the UAE and globally, of course, into shifting to clean energy sources, the renewable energies, solar, anything that we can, as well as looking into more sustainable transportation options, so electric vehicles, e-scooters, for example. So what is the relationship between health and well-being, and that transition to all these more sustainable alternatives? How does that kind of play into each other, and how do they affect each other?
Okay, so first, let me start with some statistics. That you have 75% of greenhouse gases that come from energy, the energy sector. By the energy sector, I mean energy within buildings, transportation, industry, as well as aviation. So, and the remaining 20% comes from agriculture, waste, and from the chemical industry. So, energy and the transportation are the main source of pollution. And by pollution, we mean also not only as gases, but also pollution can be in form of noise and visual pollution. So the idea is that we have mentioned two main, let's say, topics, which is good health and well-being from one side, and affordable or the clean energy from the other side. And I have to mention that these two are sustainability development goals as per the United Nations, the 17 SDGs provided by the UN, where all the countries agreed to commit to and to provide the strategies and the targets. And then we have the goal 3, which is good health and well-being, and the goal 7, which is affordably clean energy. So there is a direct relationship between these two goals, as these are interconnected, mainly which is the impact of energy and the transportation on the environment and health in form of pollution, noise pollution, visual pollution, and gas pollution. So if we look into several aspects of this type of pollution, or if we can, let's say, quantify the relationship, it can be in form of air quality that has been previously presented. which is from the energy industry in form of emissions from energy plants, industry, from transportation. There is also the impact on climate change, which can be recognized in form of heat waves, infectious disease, floods, iceberg melting, etc. Also, noise pollution from generator. For example, here in Lebanon, we rely a lot on standby generators, and these all provide some noise disturbances. Also, the impact on biodiversity from the emissions of the generators and vehicles. Also, one important point is energy access to healthcare facilities. So the idea is that healthcare facilities, they provide well-being and health services to citizens. But if from the other side, the energy comes from coal or from fossil fuels, which will also have impact on the health, but from another side. So we shall provide the green energy to these facilities to maintain that health is secured from all its aspects. Finally, there is the physical and mental activity related to the transition. But I will elaborate more on how physical and mental activity are related to the energy transition. But first, we need to clarify what kind of transition are we talking about. Do we need a replacement or a retrofit replacement for the current installation, or we need to work on energy conservation, energy efficiency, or reduction in the energy load? The idea is that it's a mix of all these approaches in form of innovation and synergy between various systems, because the load will increase. The electrical load, the energy load will increase in all cases and in a rapid matter and in a rapid pace. The idea is that we are moving to electrification of mobility, electrification of industry, and electrification of food and beverage. So the concept here of sustainability is that I need to electrify all my processes from one side and provide renewable energy from the other side. By doing this, I would get rid of a fossil fuel and enjoy the sustainable processes. The idea is that electrification will have a main impact on power load, which is also an impact on the infrastructure and an impact on the generation side. So electricity is the new fuel, but I need to limit this impact, this increase in energy and power requirement. So within the equation, we have from one side increase in demand due to electrification, or a rapid increase in demand compared to the previous era. And from the other side, we need to contain this increase in demand by investing in efficiency and in energy conservation. And here is a big challenge. Let's say in public transportation, it's not only that I need to shift from the regular type of transportation vehicles based on combustion engine fuel to electric cars, but we need to reduce the use of cars by pushing people more into public transport and by enabling the infrastructure for public transportation through planning, enabling walkability, and increasing accessibility within the city. So the idea is that by enabling this alternative type of transportation, this will promote physical and mental health of the citizens. So, and also we have the challenge of renewable energy. The idea is that taking into consideration the current load, I will need a lot of areas to install renewable energy power plants and big investment in the infrastructure. But what if I am able to, let's say, utilize distributed energy resources? So if let's say, for example, each residence has its own solar power plant and storage within the residence. By doing so, I would save a lot on the investment in the infrastructure by enabling distributed energy resources. So, which is also a challenge because it requires some investment in digitization of the infrastructure and also installing the metering infrastructure and all the ICT installations in terms of fiber optic and data centers. So to wrap it up, well-being and energy transition are interconnected. They are both targets and United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, interconnected through the emissions from the energy sector on the impact of emission from the energy sector on human well-being, on the health of human, mental, physical, social, etc.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned impacts beyond just air pollution, but also potentially noise pollution, water pollution. I think, in fact, maybe that's a good. I'm going to come back to a point that you mentioned about creating more accessible communities, but I think now that we have Avan back, maybe you can tell us, I think, a bit more about, in terms of all these activities that are happening with, water pollution that comes from certain industrial activities. How are, again, these kinds of things, how are they impacting our ecosystems? And I think we had lost you a bit at the end of your previous answer. So if you want to let us know, again, a bit more about that relationship, like you mentioned, maybe potentially more infectious diseases, how does that relationship play out?
Absolutely. So can you hear me? Is it?
Yes, we're good to go for now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, another benefit of obviously preserving our biodiversity is the control of disease and the spread of disease. So in general, natural ecosystems we regulate or we control disease carrying organisms. So when we're disrupting our ecosystems, whether it's through deforestation or human intrusion on habitat, on wildlife habitat, it can lead to an increase in and spread in diseases like Lyme disease, malaria, etc. So preserving our ecosystems can really help control the spread and transmission of such diseases. Another important benefit I think that we should highlight, and I think will resonate with a lot of people, is similar to what Mohammed was saying, is that biodiversity is necessary for our physical and mental health and well-being. So being in nature, it's been found to have like a positive impact on like both our physiological and our psychological health. And when you're out in nature, research has shown that it can reduce stress, it can reduce anxiety, depression, and even outdoor recreation. It's been linked with health improvements, right? So maybe with increased physical activity and just overall mental well-being. There's definitely a correlation between being outdoors and improved overall health. I think there's even evidence that indicates if you exercise outdoors or in green spaces, that it might be more valuable to our mental health and even just our physical performance and possibly even our motivation to continue exercising compared to if you were to exercise in other settings, let's say. So yeah, preserving and restoring our ecosystems, it's really important, not just protecting the environment and mitigating the impacts on climate change, but it has like direct benefits for human health and our well-being overall.
Thanks for that. And just maybe really, really quickly, I would just maybe be interested in knowing what we're doing in the UAE in terms of restoring of ecosystems. I know there's a lot going on in Abu Dhabi with the environmental agency, but what are any specific schemes that are being done, any strategies being put into place? If you could shed some more light about that.
Yeah, so the UAE is doing a lot in terms of environmental protection and sustainability. We have, there are a lot of protected areas here, areas that are designated as protected areas to obviously make sure that our critical habitats are well protected from any sort of development. So that's really, really important when it comes to preserving our biodiversity and ecosystems. And just in general, the way that we develop our projects here, we go through a strict environmental permitting process. And we really study the environmental impacts from A to Z. So we try to ensure that we control, and when I say we, you know, all of sort of the developers and those that carry out, you know, these projects. We look at the long, you know, both the short-term and long-term impacts from our developments, and we try as much as possible to control these impacts, especially on our marine ecology and our ecosystems. Yeah, the Environment Agency has a lot of strict regulations when it comes to that, and overall, I think you know, we're paving the way. There's a lot of great work that's being done when it comes to improving biodiversity, but a lot more work can be done as well.
Yeah, that's great to know. I think Angie, if we can just quickly come back to you a bit. So Mohammed was mentioning a few things about air quality and how this is all related to climate change. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about pollutants specifically and how that is impacting air quality, and if this is somehow linked to climate change as well.
Okay. So yes, there are pollutants that can have effects on air quality and or on climate change. For most of the people, this is not a clear difference. As I usually tell the people, air quality pollutants are these ones that can literally make you sick quickly or can kill you. The climate change pollutants are the ones that have an effect on increasing the temperature of the world. But there are pollutants that have both. They have effects on both, and our environment is such a beautiful mix of interactions. There is so many chemical interactions happening in the atmosphere that we can not even get a glimpse. And this even makes that some of the pollutants that may have an air quality effect today may have a climate change effect tomorrow, or vice versa. So here I'm talking, for instance, black carbon. The doctor was mentioning diesel. So one of the biggest problems from diesel is black carbon that is kind of counted in their PM 2.5. At the same time, when you breathe it, it has very damaging effects on your health. These can also increase the radioactive forces, and it reflects sunlight, and it absorbs the sunlight and increases the heating of the atmosphere. Then we also have things like methane and some volatile organic compounds. We have ozone. But funny enough, there are also others that have cooling effects, like sulfur dioxide or some aerosols. But at this rate that we are going, most of the cooling effects are not being enough to contrast the heating ones. But this is just like to illustrate that when we are talking about pollution, we should start integrating these conversations in climate change, air quality, and health. This is actually something that from the ministry we're starting to push. We need to start seeing those three things as integrated. And the ministry, the country, is actually part of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. And we are part of this organization with this purpose, trying to start passing the message that we need to start seeing this as a combined aspects that directly affect public health. And therefore, when we as a country are thinking of adaptation, that includes what Evan was mentioning, like nature-based solutions, or when we are talking about mitigation, like what Mohammed was saying, we start seeing the benefits that it has across everything. We can measure benefits in air quality concentrations that are reducing, climate change emissions that are decreasing, and health directly in the people that is improving.
Yeah, that's a really great summary of it. In fact, just that like we really do need to be considering all of them and not just, you know, what affects climate change and then separately what affects air quality. That's really interesting to know. Avan, if I can come back to you quickly. So, you know, we're trying to, of course, human development is a really important thing. We're trying to go forward in terms of innovation, in terms of improvement of quality of life. And of course, that means things move a lot faster. Everyone wants to get things done quickly. How can we kind of balance this need to develop as humankind, but also consider those conservation efforts and try to maintain our long-term health?
Yeah, so one of the main challenges we face is habitat destruction. So unfortunately, with human development, that often involves urbanization, deforestation, agriculture, infrastructure development. So all of that, can destroy important habitat, right, for wildlife. So, obviously solutions can be looking at ways that we can design our cities more sustainably. As I mentioned earlier, like what the UAE is doing, protecting critical habitat by designating more protected areas, and just implementing or promoting responsible, land use practices that minimize habitat loss. Another challenge we face, again, with human development is overexploitation. So overfishing, poaching, unsustainable logging or cutting down of trees, all of that can really harm our ecosystems. So again, enforcing strict regulations and implementing sustainable practices, I think that'll really help. And also supporting communities, so that they can adopt alternative, let's say, jobs or livelihoods, that don't rely on overexploitation. Of course, a major challenge that the world is facing now is climate change, as everyone's touched on. And unfortunately, climate change, it presents a really significant risk for ecosystems and biodiversity. So we know that solutions can include, of course, reducing our emissions through renewable clean energy. But there also needs to be a strong focus on nature-based solutions when we develop, on reforestation, on implementing conservation projects that help to mitigate the impacts of climate change on biodiversity. I think one last thing to mention here in terms of maybe challenges is just lack of awareness. So, many people, I think they're not aware of like the importance of biodiversity and the need to conserve our ecosystems because of their value and benefit to human health. So I think it's important that we educate the public, we educate businesses, governments, policymakers, just about the value of biodiversity and its connection to human health and well-being. And I think with more understanding and awareness, then that can improve public support for conservation. So I think that's really important to mention also.
Yeah, absolutely agreed about the awareness. In fact, it's sessions like this that hopefully whoever is attending right now, you take any one thing or a couple of things you've learned from here, talk about it with your colleagues, your friends, your families. You never really know where one conversation can go and how that spreads to everyone else around you. Because like you said, we never know where this will end up, that each one of us can have the tiniest impact, and it might one day reach someone who can have a larger impact. So yeah, it would just be great if these kinds of conversations just really keep going. Just finally, I see that we're coming close to the end. Muhammad, if you could just really quickly summarize something you mentioned earlier about having walkable, accessible communities. For example, we know over here in the UAE we're heavily dependent on the usage of cars. So I just want to know, in terms of sustainable transportation, especially in this region, in the UAE, what are we doing in terms of that? Is there any kind of plan to address it? Yeah, how is that generally going over here?
Okay, so focusing on the UAE, there is a growth, a compound annual growth rate in the EV in the EV market, which is around 30%, which is a huge. So the UAE is moving towards green mobility, but from the other side, accessibility uh, shall be accessibility is a matter of planning for the city. And we have the current planning for the city, but they are planning for the expansion, let's say, of the city. We hope that city planners are considering more accessibility within their planning. And let me here take an example, the example of the line in Neo. This city is planned in an innovative way, and we hope it will be a successful city that can ensure the travel duration within the whole city to a maximum of 20 minutes. So which is also a challenge in the design and the infrastructure, and what way of mobility shall I use? Shall it be a hyperloop? Shall it be drones, flying taxis, etc.? In the UAE, there are at least we have the strategies, and the UAE was from the earliest countries that had developed clear strategies for the shift in transportation. They have developed many pilot projects in, let's say, for example, the Hyperloop in the UAE, which is the very fast kind of train that can travel at a distance of 1 kilometer per hour. But also, the other challenge is related to urban planning, and also which is in form of access to, let's say, public facilities, access to schools, to hospitality, which is still a challenge in the UAE. But we hope that this challenge can be solved in upcoming strategies and the planning developed by the authorities. But
Yeah, absolutely.
let me just briefly focus on the other side, which is the energy side, and not only on the transportation and accessibility. The UAE has targets for net zero by 2050, which is similar to the global target. Overall, globally, we are still behind this target. And today, this early morning, I was looking at the EIA report for the net zero transition. Globally, we are behind this target, but we need to mention and to highlight that the UAE has developed many strategies and have started earlier in this transition. For instance, for the smart grid, they have already installed more than 2 million smart emitters within Dubai. And the grid also, the grid is unbundled, so the stakeholders on the within the grid, the electrical grid are unbundled, so many stakeholders increase competitiveness on the grid and better services. But the challenge is how to transform my economy from a petroleum-based economy to a carbon neutral economy. How would I endorse the hydrogen economy? What shall I implement in form of carbon capture applications and solutions within the existing facilities and industrial facilities? So there is a joint effort also that needs to be done between several of the countries to share experiences and to accelerate the transition towards clean energy and net zero, where the UAE also will be hosting the upcoming COP in November, is leading the global community and providing innovative strategies and applications within this transition. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mohammed. And it's great that you mentioned looking into what other countries are doing. So I think for this one, if I can just open up to everyone, maybe Dr. Jeffrey, starting with you. I know you mentioned earlier what some other countries are doing in terms of policies to be implemented to improve public health. But beyond that, we've talked a lot about sustainable transportation, healthy communities, healthy buildings. So if everyone can maybe just share something that we could maybe take as a lesson learned to implement over here from other places, starting with you, Dr. Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's really amazing about what's already being done here. So, and we do have laws about smoking in public places. I think we need a little bit better enforcement of those laws. I'm sure everyone's walked by cafes where people they flaunt the laws or basically just ignore them. I understand the shisha is very popular, but we really do need to enforce, especially indoors, that the no smoking in public places law. The things that they're doing here. Mohammed mentioned energy production. The fact that I think there are at least 3, or maybe now there are 4 nuclear reactors online, providing a quarter of the UAE's power. That's amazing. I mean, that's really great foresight. And also Mohammed and everyone else mentioned public transportation. The bus system is there in Abu Dhabi. I've used it. It works well. But you do notice on the bridges they're building, the new construction in Abu Dhabi, there's often a lane left in the middle, and that's for light rail and then also heavy rail. So I really encourage the nation to. I know that's part of the 2030 plan. I can't wait for it to come online and be able to really use more public transportation here. Dubai with the metro, it transformed the city. It's just amazing. So I think they're already on their way with a lot of great things. I'd love to see enforcing the smoking ban. I'd love to see easier access to charging for electric vehicles. I know that's a point that Dubai is a little bit ahead of Abu Dhabi. That will flip the change once it becomes easier to do than use a petrol car. Those are going to have huge changes. And the same with it, transportation for heavy industry, trucks and diesels. There are efforts to move to electrified heavy freight transport, and that's got to come soon too. Those are our biggest aspects here. We're fortunate that we don't have coal-fired power plants here or a lot of diesel cars, which are the major contributors to outdoor and indoor air pollution in Europe, North America, well, in the whole world. So I really can't wait to see those changes. But we can all make those little steps, and then it also goes to. We haven't talked a lot about refuse, or except that we do burn refuse here, which obviously increases air pollution, but ways that we can recycle and do it better here. Especially we're okay. Plastics has some of us, glass has a stream for recycling, but plastics, when you really dig into it, has very little to no recycling stream. If we can advocate for that switch to different types of recyclable plastics, or moving towards non-plastic packaging, that would be a huge initiative. But those are things that people are working on. There's an update now about the Tetra Pak. It used to be non-recyclable, the paper Tetra Paks, but they're now removing that aluminum foil on the inside, so it will be recyclable with paper. And those are the steps that we have to embrace, and it's going to cost a little bit here. One of the things I'd like to see them invoke here is higher taxes on sugary drinks, and also a bottle deposit or other food packaging deposit, where you have to pay a deposit that's returned when you bring it back in. That would be a big way to reduce waste that we see around. It's already a beautiful, clean place, but it can be even cleaner.
Absolutely. I think
Not
waste
much
is a
not
waste
much
is a
medicine there,
huge
but all
topic.
impacts.
Yeah. I think we need to have a couple more hours of sessions to just discuss waste and reducing and all of that. Angie, maybe I can come to you if there is anything else, any kind of last words you want to share about this, or generally lessons you think we can learn.
Well, I think this part of start seeing it as more integrated, like doing something that can improve public transportation, can also have benefits on health. So we have been looking at the case in Singapore, for instance. Singapore can be a case that will be replicated kind of in Dubai, similar conditions, just that of course here the summers are much stronger, but we are having, when you are forcing people to use public transport, you are forcing them to walk, but without they even consciously thinking. And these just walking 10, 15, 20 minutes in a day has a massive improvement on health. And if we are doing these walkways with nature-based solutions, where it's shaded areas where people can have some sort of relaxed time what they are doing, we are reducing stress levels, and then we are reducing emissions. So it's a whole holistic response. And I think this is the type of mitigation or interventions that we should start targeting. So I think Singapore life expectancy has increased just by changes like these, and that the satisfaction of people are also increased. What we're talking about well-being, you ask the people and they feel more satisfied because perhaps there are better conditions that make them feel more satisfied.
Yeah, it's such a great point about encouraging people to walk more, because I think over here it's more of, it's not that nobody wants to walk, it's no one wants to walk in the heat. So implementing those nature-based solutions would really help with that. Avan, maybe there's something that you want to share on that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, as I was saying before, UAE and the country's done so much already when it comes to sustainability and environmental conservation. But we can of course learn valuable lessons from other countries when it comes to like policy planning, regulations, etc. Especially when it comes to protecting biodiversity. I think if we look at other countries that have implemented conservation programs, and those that have like really successfully implemented nature-based solutions as part of their developments, I think that can really provide a lot of insight for us and into like effective strategies, because I think there needs to be more emphasis on nature-based solutions really as part of our developments here going forward. And looking at again maybe community engagement, so looking at how other countries are involving the local community when it comes to conservation efforts. I think that'll also show the effectiveness of involving the community and taking ownership and ultimately managing resources sustainably.
Yeah, Mohammed, I know we're already a bit over time. Any really quick last words before we just close the session?
Totally. The idea is that just I'll wrap it up to repeat what they have just said. That we need to endorse integrated urban planning that prioritize mixed land use and public transport. Also, we need to endorse public engagement and education, sustainable education, and promote active lifestyle, and invest more in the public transport sector.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think this, thank you to everyone who's staying a few minutes longer as well. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to our panelists as well. It was really valuable to hear all of your opinions. And I think from this, if there is anything we can take, is that well-being is such a large topic. There are so many things it's interconnected with, so many different factors and impacts to play into it. So, we really just encourage everyone to look into it as you can on your own individually, have more conversations. Thank you so much. Lana, I'll just hand it over to you if there's anything.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, Sana. It was such an interesting session. We're going to be posting the recording of the session on our YouTube page, which I'll share with you soon. And there are a few questions. We'll try to address them later. I took screenshots of the questions and their emails, and hopefully I'll direct them to you later. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.